All right. Um, so thank you everyone for joining us for this evening's webinar, Your Critical Race Theory Toolkit, How to Fight Racist Ideology in Our Schools. Want to just kick off with some housekeeping stuff. First of all, as you may have just seen, this is being recorded. We will have links to the video, and you can share that with your friends. That will be posted to the 603 Alliance website. Also, as participants join the meeting, they are either already on mute or will be muted, and your video camera and ability to unmute yourself are disabled, just so we can keep the noise and the distractions down. We will have a Q&A at the end. We request that you send your questions to this email address, info@603alliance.org. It takes about 2 minutes sometimes for those emails to flow through to us, so we just request that you send your questions early, and the earlier you send it, the more likely it is that we'll be able to get to your question. We will get to as many of them as we can. We will be posting the recording. We will also be posting copies of the slides, so there are quite a few links in these slides. You will have an opportunity to download the slides complete with all of those links. So if you're planning on taking notes, you don't really need to. You can just download the slides. All of that will be posted by Sunday. We are just a quick disclaimer. The 603 Alliance is hosting this webinar. We invite speakers on a regular basis, and they are not necessarily responsible for the opinions and positions of the 603 Alliance, and vice versa. Little bit of background on the 603 Alliance. We were founded in 2015. We're a grassroots organization. We are all volunteer. Our mission is to restore constitutional principles at all levels of government. We have done quite a few projects over the years. That has included training candidates for state representative. We held an inaugural ball when President Trump first took office. We've hosted multiple events with people like James O'Keefe, Steve Bannon, Trevor Loudon, and many, many more. And we have a big event coming up in July. We have noticed that there are quite a few newcomers on the scene, people who have not really been involved before and are getting involved because they care about election integrity and critical race theory, and some other issues are top of mind these days. And we wanted to have a conference to get those folks together with some of the experienced grassroots activists from around the state, give them an opportunity to network and share information and hear from some great speakers. So that will take place on July 24th in Manchester. In addition, the same day, we are doing a dinner event. That is a dinner event with Mike Lindell from MyPillow, will be our keynote speaker for dinner. That's a fundraiser. So you can get a ticket for the day event or for the evening event or for both. There's a combo ticket available. To find out more about that, visit our website, 603alliance.org/events. So a quick run through the agenda. We're gonna have a short video from a gentleman named Dan Richards, and then we're actually going to come back to a second video from him at the end. Dan first reached out to me a couple months ago and was keenly interested in critical race theory and what we can do about it. And so he's going to kind of give an overview of what is CRT and what's wrong with it. We're then going to go through a quick legislative update because we had some interesting developments today, which will have a pretty dramatic impact on this whole discussion. Then the majority of what you're going to hear is going to be from Anne Marie Banfield. Anne Marie has been a kind of the education activist, the expert in New Hampshire for quite a long time. And she's going to talk about how you can make a difference in your school district. We'll have a short closing video from Dan Richards, kind of what you can expect if you're starting to fight this fight in your school district, and then we'll wrap up with a little Q&A. And as I said, if you can send us your questions ahead of time or as they come up, that would be very beneficial. So let me just kick it off with a video from Dan Richards.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dan Richards, and I want to share with you some important information about critical race theory this evening, both my own personal experience, but also what critical race theory is, how to deal with it when you encounter it, and hopefully how you can easily identify critical race theory when it's being taught in your school system. But before I do that, I want to thank the 603 Alliance for focusing on this incredibly important topic. Critical race theory is a topic that I think many of you may not have heard of before. I certainly had never heard of it before January until I had a really unpleasant encounter with it. And it's taken me some number of months to learn exactly what it is and all the ways that it manifests itself. But I'm hoping that I can condense the amount of time it took me to learn what it is and how to deal with it down into just a 5 or 10 minute segment here this evening and arm you with some of the tools that you're going to need. But before I do that, I want to quickly do an introduction so you know who I am, and then share some of this information with you. So I'm going to share my screen with you. A quick introduction. We're going to talk about critical race theory. We'll do an overview, and then have some examples, and then a little bit of information about my story, and to arm you with some tools to be able to fight against it. So I'm a husband, a father. I'm from the Upper Valley originally. Went to Richmond Middle School in Hanover, New Hampshire. Graduated in 1987, and then Hanover High School in 1991. I moved away for a number of years, but then moved back to New Hampshire in 2012 and have been here for the better part of a decade. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I run a travel risk and crisis management business here in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Also, I'm the president of a captive insurance company, and we have chosen to base our companies here in New Hampshire after originally I founded them in Massachusetts. What is critical race theory? Well, critical race theory is a set of legal frameworks and a theory that was developed at Harvard Law School in the 1970s. It is actually based on critical theory, which was developed in Germany at the Frankfurt School in the 1930s. And it's a neo-Marxist framework that one can use to analyze the world around you. When it's applied to race, critical race theory, believe it or not, assumes that racism is present in everything. It also divides society into oppressors and the oppressed. There is no neutrality in the critical race theory framework. You either are an oppressor or you are being oppressed by the oppressors. It seeks, to define equity as equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. And it's through this concept that you can see that it's directly linked to some of the Marxist theories of the 1930s in the Frankfurt School. So don't be confused by this word equity. The word is everywhere. And the reality is that equity does not mean equality of opportunity. It means equality of outcome. The other crazy component of critical race theory is that it considers all whites to be racist. Not only that, non-whites cannot be racist. So by virtue of the color of your skin, something that you have no control over, obviously, when you're born, you are put into this category, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing, according to the critical race theorists, that you can do about it. The other thing that is so troubling about critical race theory is that it seeks to dismantle the colorblind framework upon which our society is based. You know, all of us are supposed to be equal under the law. And while our laws are not perfect and the application of them is certainly not perfect, that is what we all aspire to. That is not what critical race theory aspires to do. Critical race theory aspires to dismantle the colorblind framework and to pick winners and losers and to give people preference based on the color of their skin and nothing else. And it advocates, and this is perhaps the most troubling component of critical race theory, it advocates for discrimination against whites to achieve equity. Let me say that again. To discriminate against whites in order to achieve equity. And this, according to the critical race theorists, is not considered racism. If all of this seems crazy, it is. But there are an enormous number of people who actually believe either some or all of this. And one of the chief proponents, and actually the man who wrote the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram Kendi, said that the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination, and the only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Which, again, when I first encountered these writings by Kendi, I just could not believe it. And one of the most pernicious things about critical race theory is that almost nobody calls it critical race theory. It always comes cloaked in this other seductive, really good sounding language, like, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or culturally responsive pedagogy, or, other kinds of, multicultural educational initiatives that, again, for those of us that don't peel back the onion and don't take a closer look, sound really good. The objective, though, to be clear, is that people are not to be judged by the content of their character, which was Martin Luther King's vision, but rather by the color of their skin, which is, to me as an American, completely and 100% wrong and repugnant. Its underlying principles, as I mentioned, are Marxist, and what it does is it puts the identity of the group ahead of the identity of the individual. So you as an individual and your individual traits are actually subordinated to the identity of the group. And the identity of that group is measured only by one thing: the color of your skin. One of the other chief proponents of critical race theory is a woman, an author by the name of Robin DiAngelo. She has said that the question is not, did racism take place, but how did racism manifest in that situation? And that's one of the scariest things about critical race theory. And that is that they assume that critical race theory is present in every interaction, and that the underlying racism that we all feel, either consciously or subconsciously, is present in literally every single interaction. As I said at the beginning of this conversation, there is no neutrality. To say that, oh, I'm not racist, that in and of itself, for the critical race theorist, means that you are in fact racist, because there is only racism or anti-racism. And to be anti-racist means to believe in equity. And to believe in equity means to not treat people fairly. It means that you are going to treat people differently based solely on the color of their skin. And that is wrong. So thank you for listening. This has just been a quick primer on what critical race theory is, how to identify it. And I look forward to joining you a little bit later this evening to talk about my personal experience, how I got involved in the fight against critical race theory, and some of the things that you can do to try and fight against it when you encounter it in your school system. So thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Apologies for that. So before I introduce our next speaker, I would like to give a short legislative update. This is not in the slides because it's brand new. It just happened today. But I think it's important that people be aware that as we go through this presentation, you're going to hear a lot about how to fight critical race theory. Today, we made a major step forward in providing some legal backup for concerned parents and concerned citizens who are interested in combating critical race theory in our schools. Several months ago, legislation was introduced. It was called House Bill 544, and it addressed something called divisive concepts. And this was introduced by Representative Keith Ammon from New Boston. And it was really aimed at preventing schools from teaching that one race is inherently guilty, or that one race is somehow superior to another, or that one gender is superior to another. That essentially it's age, gender identity, sexual orientation, marital status, all of these things. It basically said, let's not teach that any of those is better, or being a member of a group of any of those categories is better than another, or that people should be treated differently because of their age, sex, gender, race, and so forth. So this this bill eventually got added to the state budget, which has happened with quite a lot of legislation that is considered to be high priority by House leadership. And so when you may hear news today that the budget passed the House. This would have been the budget that was finally agreed upon between the House and the Senate. So that passed the House today, and it is expected to get the governor's signature. What that means is that the modified language that was originally introduced as House Bill 544 is expected to become law. And while the Senate version did pare back some of the so-called divisive concepts that are prohibited, the end result, I think, is pretty satisfying to those of us who are opposed to critical race theory. There is, one of the other things that the Senate added when they made their changes was to add some enforcement mechanisms, and that is critically important. This, when it becomes law, and I'm assuming that it will become law at this point, it will allow for New Hampshire citizens to sue their school district, to file a civil action against their school district if they find that critical race theory or divisive concepts are being taught to their children. The second thing it will do is it modifies the educator code of conduct such that teachers who are teaching this material or who are teaching divisive concepts as, from an advocacy point of view, will be in violation of the code of conduct, which means that you can file a complaint against them with the Department of Education, and they can potentially lose their teaching credentials. So that's kind of an overview of the law. One of the things that I want to strongly encourage everyone to do is to read that section of the law. And so it's not in the slides right now, but we will add a link to it, or perhaps just give you a page or two that contains the language on divisive concepts, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And there are a lot of people, including Democrats on the House floor today, who were talking about what they believe that this bill does or doesn't do. And quite a lot of the information that's being spread about it is just plain wrong. So there are statements, for example, that this will prohibit us from teaching about racism. And the fact is, it does no such thing. In fact, it actually says nothing in this section should be construed to prohibit discussing the historical existence of ideas and subjects identified in this section, or racism, or anything else. It does, however, proscribe educators from advocating the positions that Dan Richards was talking about in his video. So it's really important that you read it. It's not very long. It's really important that you understand it, because when people tell you that this is somehow curtailing free speech or something like that, it isn't. What it's saying is that as taxpayers, we don't want to be funding the teaching of these kinds of divisive identity politics concepts in our schools. The final thing I'll say about the legislation is that when you read it, you will see exactly what it prohibits or what it defines as a divisive concept. And if you look at that, one of the most effective ways that you can have a conversation with somebody if they're on the other side of this, if they don't understand what the bill actually says, one of the most effective things you can do is to put that in front of them and say, which of these concepts do you believe we should be teaching our children? And I can tell you right now, it's really hard to defend some of the things that these people are teaching. So With that, I'm going to hand it over to Anne Marie Banfield. Anne Marie is a longtime activist in New Hampshire. She was, early in the fight against Common Core, and I think had quite a lot to do with Common Core being exposed and stopped in New Hampshire. She has since been looking at critical race theory and social emotional learning and student privacy and all kinds of other issues. But today, we've invited Anne Marie to come on and talk about what you can do in your school district to combat critical race theory. So, Anne Marie, I'm going to run the slides. Just let me know when you need me to advance to the next one, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, first of all, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight because this is a very important topic. I know it's sweeping across the nation, and it's almost hard to not see it sometimes in the news, which is good because people are starting to see it and saying, "What is this?" and starting to say, "This isn't for my kids." So I'm just going to start off real quick by telling you a little bit about myself, just because I always kind of feel like you probably should know something about me. Who's telling you this information? So I've been working in New Hampshire for probably about 15 years as a parental rights activist and an advocate for parents, especially when it comes to their education, to their kids' education. So I tend to focus on academic excellence in education. So if I'm looking at a bill or I'm looking at what's going on in the classroom, I always go back to where's the focus on academic excellence. And that's really one of the best ways that you can address this particular topic. Ask that question. Ask the question, what does this have to do with academics? And what you're going to find out is when you start digging deeper into this, it's really a worldview that conflicts with a lot of people's worldviews, and it conflicts with your values. And so, since when did you give the right to a school district to change the values in your child? Especially, what Jim brought up earlier, or maybe it was Dan about how different it is from Martin Luther King Jr.'s message. And I think that's always the best way to attack this and way to approach it. I think it's a great way to approach it. So I want to thank the 603 Alliance also for hosting this. Like I said, I've been doing this for about 15 years. I analyze bills before the legislature. I speak with a lot of legislators on, important issues facing our kids in school, but I also sometimes, they'll look at a bill and they think, oh, this looks great. And then I'll bring them information that, oh, wait, not such a great bill. Maybe there's privacy issues that we need to look at, things like that. So that's what I do. And also, I write a lot for Granite Grok. So if you have the opportunity, please go to their website and under authors, go to mine and check out what I posted today. I think you're going to really appreciate it. So I was asked to put together this toolkit. And what I did was I basically looked at other toolkits, because like I said, this is kind of exploding and other organizations are putting things together. And, so you might be able to find something and you might be able to say, oh, this is good information. What I try to do is I try to take all the good stuff, put it in ours, but then there's a lot of stuff geared towards New Hampshire that maybe the other toolkits don't have. And so this is a little bit more focused on New Hampshire. I think what you need to first do is figure out if there is a problem in your schools, and you need to start searching, you need to start look at the website. You'd be amazed at what they're putting up on the websites, and look for those buzzwords Dan mentioned early, equity, diversity, inclusion. I don't know if I would automatically assume the worst, but it could certainly trigger you to start looking deeper and looking closer. And, and these are the school districts that put it up on the website. You kind of wonder how many aren't, but, start looking at the agendas on your school board. Go back and look at old agendas and see, what they talked about the last year, because this has really been coming in really hard the last year. So, one of the things you want to do is focus again on academic content and not changing your child's values. If you walk away with anything tonight, just remember that when you're talking about this, where's the academic content in this? There's none. Why are you trying to change my child's worldview, their values, their value system to something that, you know, has a real negative approach on children. So let me start with number one, and that is to visit your school district's website. Obviously, go to your district's website, look at it. Look at your school board members. Do you know any of them? You know, it kind of surprises me sometimes. Everybody knows their president, everybody knows their vice president, but a lot of people do not know their school board members, and they're our neighbors. And, you know, these are the easiest people to reach. You can't reach the president. You sometimes can't even reach, you know, your senator or your congressman. So, you know, reach out to them and start a discussion with them, talk to them, you know, open up a line of communication, because that's your best bet. I mean, it's better to not have to fight it. Quite frankly, who wants to fight their school district? Nobody wants to fight it, but there's so much money coming into these schools that free money, you know, kind of sometimes is the driving force. So start to get to know your school board members. If you don't know them, send them an email, introduce yourself. I mean, it could be a good time for them to get to know you. Be friendly, professional at all times, build up that trust so that they know that you're reasonable in this approach. And you know, again, go to the Granite Grok site, go read some of my articles, especially the one I posted today. And it's going to give you kind of an idea of how to approach them, how to talk about it. Because earlier today, one of the parents on one of the Facebook pages said, you know, I don't even know how to attack the subject. I don't even know how to talk about it, because the last thing you want to do is be seen as this racist against, who's against talking about racism. Well, that's not what this is about. And when you understand what it's about, and you understand that I'm sorry, but we still kind of believe in the content of character, and that we want our children uplifted versus bashed over the head with all these negative things, put into a box and not put into a box. It helps you to understand how to talk to them and how to approach the subject. So let's go to the next slide. So you definitely need to start with fact finding. And I mentioned, go to the website, gather as much information as you can. Don't automatically assume the worst. I mean, I went to a website not too long ago in Northampton, and it was kind of actually a pleasant surprise, because one of the teachers had put up some artwork by his students that showed some quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King. I sent him an email. I copied the board members, and I thanked him. I said, this is really nice to see, because this, to me, his message was one of peace and justice. If you need to, file a 91A right to know request for all the documents, materials, curriculum, books, assignments, surveys, and anything else involving race, diversity, inclusion, and equity. So if you don't know how to do that, there's samples out there. There's samples. A lot of times what I do is I will do a Google search of 91A right to know request sample, boop, pops up. I copy it, paste it. I remove what, the sample's asking for, and I plug in what I need, what I'm looking for. And a lot of times that needs to be documents. If you're asking a question, I guess legally they don't have to answer you. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. If they don't, I mean, there's your transparency issue that you can always address later. But go ahead and, get a sample, and that'll help you work through your right to know request, gather information. Some things, again, you might find that are not so offensive. Okay, well, then maybe we don't bother with that. But, there's things, you're going to learn, you're going to start seeing it, and you're going to see where this is a problem, and I don't like the way that they're approaching it. And so you need to make a valid and thoughtful response. So let's go to slide 3, or sorry, the next slide. Okay, so this might come as a surprise to you. You might be going, why on earth would I ask for a grant review committee? Well, a lot of the money that's coming into your schools for critical race theory comes through a grant. So asking the school board to create a grant review committee and examine the terms of the grants coming into the school district are a really good idea. Then it kind of puts your school board members more in touch. And it also puts them maybe on record. Maybe they approve the grant, and you can go back and say, why did you approve this grant? So all grants should be approved by the school board, and they should understand the terms of each grant before approving. Grants can remove local controls, the terms. They exchange local control for what the grants want from the district. An example would be a Nellie Mae grant. Beware, Nellie Mae grants, Nellie Mae says that their main mission is to turn your kids into political activists. That's what they say. So a lot of schools take Nellie Mae money. So, look at that kind of stuff. The Nellie Mae, will tell schools to tell their teachers, I'm sorry, in the provisions, your teachers have to teach this way. And a lot of times what they're putting in there is faulty pedagogy, faulty teaching methods that, if you look at studies, they don't work well in the classroom. So, here you just found something that might not be directed towards critical race theory, but you might find other problems coming into your school when you look through those grant applications. So you need to file a right to know request to review the grants that are coming into the district. I've done that several times in New Hampshire, and I've gone through them. If you need help, because some things might sound good, and I can tell you that I can find the bad, but they actually sound good. So you might go, oh, what's wrong with this? And I can kind of show you something like, okay, here's the problem with this. And so I'm happy to do that. So we'll go to the next slide. Pay attention to your school board races. Wow. So this one for sure, I think, is what everybody's starting to think about, which is great, because I've been, I think it's one of these things that a lot of us have kind of missed. We haven't focused on, and it is critical that that we make sure that good school board members are being elected. And by all means, think about running yourself. If you live in the district, run. If you can't run, please look around for somebody who can. Help them get elected, help them with funding. Do what you can to get these people in, because like I said, it's a lot easier if you don't have to fight rather than fight them. And there is a PAC that is launched called the 1776 Project, and they will now aid school board candidates across the country who reject the introduction of critical race theory at their public schools. So direct candidates and current school board members to School District Governance Association of New Hampshire too. They've been a great resource for school board members across New Hampshire. Definitely check them out. Definitely ask your school board members to check them out. And they're a great alternative for school boards, because some of them are paying dues to the New Hampshire School Boards Association out of your pocket, out of your budget. And oftentimes they conflict with what you probably want as a parent going on in your school. So the 603 Alliance, of course, plans to offer training to school board candidates for upcoming races. And those elections are in November for cities, February and March for towns. So just be aware, start looking now. I mean, I'm hearing already from parents in some of the districts that they want, that they want to run. And this is great. I mean, they're going to step up and run. One thing I also want to bring up that's not included is when you're on the school board, or if you're not on the school board, look at when your superintendent is up for contract renewal, or maybe your school board or your superintendent is leaving. Get involved there too. If you find a good leader, again, it's just easier. You don't have to fight this. If you just put the right people in place that are focused on academic excellence and things that matter to parents, then it's a whole lot easier than trying to fight. So it is critical that you get involved if your superintendent is leaving. A lot of times I recommend look from within, their track record, a lot of parents know that person, maybe they've been a principal and this is their opportunity, and they've, the parents love them, or really support them. I think that tells you a lot about a superintendent or a superintendent candidate. Also look on social media, because a lot of times if they're jumping from district to district, there's a reason. A lot of times parents are driving them out, and not always, but again, why are they leaving? Why are they going to other school districts? What is going on? Do a Google search. You'd be amazed at what pops up. Exeter just hired a principal, in one of their schools who, when the parents filed a right to know request, found that she was mocking them and calling them wackos, and they just hired her in SAU 16. And so, if people had done a Google search on her, they might have seen that in the news, and now you know what you're dealing with. And I mean, those are simple things to do. So just wanted to pass that along. If you want to go to the next slide, I think we're ready for that. Okay, so get candidates to commit to anti-CRT positions. That would be school board candidates, obviously, but why not ask some of the other candidates running for office? You can email them, call, ask anyone running for office to sign a pledge to ban critical race theory in their school. We can go a little further than what's in law. If you read the law, I mean, I think it's a great start. I think it does some really helpful things for parents in the state, but there might be ways that you can even strengthen that. So, ask your school board members if they're committed to that. And I think this is really important before the law. And maybe I would say it's still important because, you don't want to come across somebody that, has opposite views, but thank goodness we do have the law. I think it's going to help us with that. And I just did want to mention one thing about the grants, and that I failed to mention when I was on that slide. The grants also coming from the federal government, and President Biden has committed to dumping $1 billion into school for CRT. And I'll say it again, he's going to dump $1 billion into our schools for CRT. And there's 2 pieces of legislation on the federal level that will help facilitate that. The problem will be how your school will handle it now that we have state statute, which will obviously or hopefully be signed by Governor Sununu. Now that we have that language in law, that is so important. I mean, I'm so grateful that we're going to get some language in there, because if they take this money and they start implementing this in your school district and it violates state law, we now have remedies. Because you might say, well, CRT violates the Civil Rights Act, violates the US Constitution, equal protection. True. But we also have a committed administration with a US Department of Education that doesn't care if you think it violates, if you think that this violates your civil rights or your child's civil rights. They will remove those cases. They will not handle them. So now that we have this in state law, I can't tell you how important that was to get in the language, in our language. I think it's very important to thank your legislators. Thank them for including that. Thank you for getting that into law. Obviously, when Governor Sununu signs it, but it is critical that we now have that in place. We don't have a friendly administration, and they want this in our schools, even if you don't. So I just wanted to mention that and again, you can find that in the federal grants that are coming into your school, because sometimes they'll sidestep the State Department of Education, and that grant will come directly into your school. Okay, so yep, that was good. That's good. So set up a website or Facebook page. I think this is really, really important. Hollis did that. So if you go to their website, it's abouthollis.com. What a fantastic page. It's probably the template of what you would want to do in your school district. They are exposing it. Once that's set up, once that people know that other people are fighting this, they'll start coming out of the woodwork, especially if you're speaking up. It helps when other people are speaking up. And so they're getting information from inside the school, that are people that are leaking information. And so they're able to see what's actually going on inside the school, because sometimes they're just not telling you. And even when you do right to know requests, keep in mind, you still need to keep watching, you still need to keep digging, because they may not show you everything if there's some technicality to not showing you. So definitely set up a website, set up a Facebook page, build a database with residents who are interested in academics versus a radical political agenda. And so what I mean by that is if you take the lead on this, start immediately writing down names and contact information. So that way, when you have a meeting or when you need to get information out to parents in the community, boom, you have an email address. You can get it to them and say, have you seen this? Have you looked at this? That's really, really important. And the other thing is, I did want to mention is that dailywire.com came out with an article a couple days ago, and it's called, "Here are the thousands of teachers who say they are willing to violate the law to keep pushing CRT." Included in that list are the teachers in New Hampshire that have pledged to defy this, what appears to be this new law that's going to be coming in effect. I would suggest going there. I would suggest looking. I think Jim said that we're going to include that information or that link. But again, I'll say the name of the article in case you want to go review it immediately. "Here are the thousands of teachers who say they are willing to violate law to keep pushing CRT," on dailywire.com. So go check that out. Go look at the teachers, go see if, they list all the school districts, all these teachers signed a pledge. And it was interesting, they signed a pledge with the Zinn project. And if you do anything, I would suggest go check out the Zinn project, and which is run by Howard Zinn, and check him out, because what he has done in our schools in terms of history is not good. And so this is what I mean. We need to keep a close eye. We need to watch, and we need to encourage our teachers to be mindful of what they are teaching, that this does violate our values. If we're so inclusive in this community, then please respect our viewpoint too. So, okay, let's go to the next slide. So U.S. Parents Involved in Education is just a source I wanted to bring to your attention. They have a template for school board policy prohibiting CRT. We do have a New Hampshire chapter. So if you go to their website, USPI, I think it's .com, but they do have a guide to help you with critical race theory. But you also have another resource in New Hampshire, and that's Mike Gendry. So go there, go to that website, familiarize yourself with it, save it, look at their resources, and they might have something in addition to what you're learning here tonight that could help you. Just wanted to bring that up just as another resource for you. So next slide. So this is critical, and this is probably the most important thing that you need to do, and that is to show up to the board meetings. The squeakiest wheel gets the most attention, and if you are at home and you are not attending meetings, or you're just watching them, then you're missing a real opportunity to guide your school district. You may not have kids in the school district, but go look at your property tax bill. And because that's what's going there every year. I mean, would you send all that money to a lousy plumber? No, every year. Would you spend that kind of money for, an electrician who's, messing things up in your house? Of course not. So keep in mind that this is your money. I hear so many times, get your kids out of the public schools, get your kids out of the public schools. Well, not everybody can do that. And in addition, this is what you're paying for. You are going to be the person on the other end when these kids graduate that, may become radicalized and militarized by this kind of approach. And, I think what we want is we want a common sense, logical approach to race relations. Nobody's against teaching history. I want my kids to learn about racism. I want them to learn about slavery. I think everybody does. Everybody understands that. But this is very focused on militancy and identities versus maybe uplifting children and giving them good values of kindness, respect, and things that, as they go out into the world, maybe they're not perfect, but at least, they're going to treat people with dignity. So definitely show up in person if you can. Letters and emails help. In terms of swaying the school board, there's power in numbers. The wave of resistance is beginning to grow now. And so it's not too late to try to get together with people in your community and start looking and start addressing this if it needs to be addressed right now. Okay, the next slide. It doesn't hurt to ask your school board member their position on CRT. I think it's a good idea. Why not ask them? Ask them what they think. Ask them what they plan on doing, or in terms of as the overseer of the school. Is there anything in place to ensure that students are protected from ideological indoctrination at the school? Take that to your state senator and representatives too. It's time that they hear from parents that they are interested in this issue and want to know where they stand. So, this is a good question. It should be coming up. You should be asking this at any candidate forum, whether it be school board. Northampton, where I reside, we had recently with our school board election, there was something put out there that, if you have any questions for school board members, you can ask them, you can send them an email. So I did. I sent an email to the two candidates, or I think three candidates at the time. And one of them responded and said I was the only person who asked questions of them. So I don't have kids in the school, and I was the only one who asked questions. Don't let that happen. Be that person that's asking these questions. Get this information. Ask about other issues too, certainly, but ask their position on this. Okay, the next slide. So talk to your children about what's being taught, because that's where a lot of the information is going to come from. That way they know that you're in tune. If you don't even ask them, they may not even come home and tell you anything. They might, just not even think about it because it's going on in class. Ask them about their subjects, talk to them about what they're learning. Certainly read the course syllabi and investigate any third-party websites or organization referenced. Many teachers are using educational websites as resources for lessons and videos, and a quick check of all these types of websites your teacher uses will tell you a lot of the tone for the lessons. And so a few notorious ones are Facing History, Learning for Justice, and one of the creepy ones, CRT and thebrain.com. Definitely talk to other parents, because if they're not aware, now you're making them aware. And if they see something, they're going to probably run back to you and say, oh my gosh, guess what I saw? That's the kind of way to open up a discussion, send them information. I do know that one person said that, when I'm talking to my husband, or I think our ex-husband, about this, I don't know how to approach this with them because he just wants to be confrontational. And I said, well, maybe it would be better to gather information. For instance, the article that I just wrote in Granite Grok today, present that to him, present information and facts, because sometimes when you are trying to make the argument, you might not do as good of a job. I mean, sometimes I let the experts speak for me, and it's really helpful when you're hearing from somebody in the field. If I'm talking about math, if I bring in a mathematician, for instance. So those are the kinds of things that you can do. Just get that conversation going. And I think that's the next slide. Yeah. So review the curriculum. That's very important, obviously, in your district. Pay special attention to social studies and U.S. history, and why it may not always be possible to view the curriculum for a specific course or teacher. District and state standards are available for most subjects online. The wording is often vague, but woke ideology has a recognizable signature. A quick automated word search for buzzwords like equity, diversity, anti-racism, systemic racism, social justice, oppress, narrative, and bias is a good start. And they will most likely to avoid the term critical race theory. So look for buzzwords like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in this case, equity refers to equal outcomes, not equality of opportunity. And this will prevent all children from excelling. So if there's equal outcomes, that doesn't mean that, you know, anybody gets to move ahead. So that's really important to know and look at. And we also have social studies standards that were reviewed through the Department of Education in New Hampshire. And then COVID hit, and I know that they were not released, and I don't know when those are up for review, but let me just tell you that everybody needs to read them. Everybody needs to think about what they are going to set as standards in the state, and then everybody needs to fight if we need to improve them. And I use the term fight, but maybe that's not the proper term, because you would go before the State Board of Education and you would ask them to maybe make changes. So maybe that's not really a fight, or let's hope it doesn't get to that level. Let's just hope that if they're released, they're good. If we need to make any improvements to them, that's well received. Let's hope for that. And so definitely we'll be keeping an eye out for that. And once that happens, I can assure you that I will be screaming that from the rooftops. So request that your school board post the competencies on the district website for every class and every grade level and review the competencies. I don't want to get too much into this because you might be going, what are competencies? We have state standards. Those are academic focused. Competencies tend to be the non-academic or soft skills. And so this is where you might see, are you competent in race relations, children? And this is where you would see what we are seeing is coming through the social emotional learning. And so, and I haven't really seen this in New Hampshire, but in other states. So if it's coming through social emotional learning, they're saying, you know, we're going to address these race relations in that, under that umbrella. And if they issue competencies, and we saw this in Arizona. Arizona actually has a long list of standards on race relations that your kids must have in order to move on, because competencies, you don't move on unless you share those values. So keep that in mind, that if they don't have the proper values, behaviors, attitudes, then they don't move forward. And if this is about an algebra concept, okay, that might make sense. But now what we're seeing through competencies is you have to have the right attitudes. You have to have the right values. And by the way, competencies will become digital badges at some point. We already know this. And so that means that this is all digitalized, and competencies go on to colleges through college applications. That's already happening in New Hampshire. And so this is one of the reasons why I oppose competency-based education in New Hampshire, but it is here, and I would certainly love to see it go away, because it really shifts focus away from academics to these soft skills that take time away from learning the academics in the classroom. And it's also going to be used to change your child's attitudes, values, and beliefs. So if your district is posting those competencies on their website, and they used to at first, I saw them on many of our district's websites, and I wrote a harsh critique, because even when they addressed some of the academics, they were pretty pathetic. So ask them to post them. Wouldn't it be interesting to take a look at the academic competencies? What I found, even like in a math class, was that they would say, if you complete these competencies, you're competent in Algebra 1. You are nowhere near competent in Algebra 1 if you pass those competencies, because a lot of them didn't even focus on all of the concepts that you have to learn by the time you're done with the typical algebra class. So that's where we might find competencies on attitudes and values towards race relations in the future. Those will become their digital badges, and they have the possibility of following them through life and into college and beyond. So it wouldn't hurt to post those on the district website, obviously. So, yep, next one. And one more thing, anything that is a competency means it is assessed. I want to just make that very clear. If they post it as a competency, that means that they have to assess it. So if you look at these competencies and there's something in there that looks a little strange, understand that they're assessing your kids on that. And that might be something you might want to take a closer look at. So one of the things that I do is I connect with teachers too. Not a lot, but from time to time, and I do have a few that feed me information of what's going on in their school district. It really helps. You need to keep that confidential, obviously, because that is something that could harm them in their profession. So most likely they probably won't even say anything for fear of they're losing their job. But if you know somebody and they know that you would keep things confidential, why not strike up a conversation with them and, ask them for information, but never, ever reveal their name. I mean, I do this all the time. I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never revealed their name, even when we've had harsh differences on some other issues. They can shine a light on what's going on in the schools and help other parents understand the severity. So if you can get good information from them, because a lot of times they want to leak it. A lot of times they do want people on the outside to know what's going on. It's kind of funny about that because they're disturbed, they're disturbed by what they're seeing. So when someone shares that information, make sure that you keep it in confidence. We definitely want that. So, okay, the next slide. 14. All right. So if you're not sure what to do with the evidence, submit it to whataretheyllearning.com. It's a website that tracks CRT indoctrination in all 50 states. That's just another resource I wanted to give you. Certainly share it with Granite Graph. Certainly you can share it with me. Again, I keep everything confidential. So I have a lot of parents that send me information and I don't share their name. As you can see, when you read my articles or when you see anything from me, names are not included unless, of course, they've given me their permission. So by all means, share them with those three, but definitely whataretheyllearning.com if you see something really, really bad. So check out the nonprofit No Left Turn, another resource in education for more information, how to get involved. There's the website. In addition to mobilizing parents to demand more transparency in the education system, No Left Turn also facilitates legal counsel for parents, students, and teachers who require support to battle school indoctrination. So there's your legal source. If we need to go to that next step, and we can certainly find some resources probably in New Hampshire too to help you out, but that's a good one. Additionally, No Left Turn supports legal actions against school districts that conduct discriminatory teaching and training. And it is nearly growing faster than they can keep up with, as many parents are joining the fight, but more are needed. So that's a great resource for you. And the next one. So contact the media. Now, you might not be comfortable doing that, but I would encourage you to do that because, first of all, if you don't want your name in print, let's say, they are under ethical guidelines to keep that anonymous. I mean, you do have to tell them, you do have to make it very clear to them, but contact the media regarding incidents of injustice, bullying, radicalization in your community. Those who push CRT ideology count on parents and students not fighting back due to the manufactured stigma. I mean, they're hoping you don't say anything. And so we need to shine a light. I mean, I did it for parents in Exeter this last few months about the prom. I mean, I kept a lot of their identities confidential. We passed on a lot of information. It went national, but because I refused to name anybody, their names weren't included, and that's important to a lot of parents. And those who speak out, even better. But we need to be respectful that their kids are in school and that we've seen some of them get bullied, and we don't want that. So make sure. And by the way, if they are getting bullied, I personally think you shine the light on that and take that to the next school board meeting and make that, what are they doing to protect these kids? Just keep shining the light. I think that's one of the big important things to do. And make sure that you're speaking in terms of logic and reason. You could be painted in a bad light just for speaking up. There is no reason to give them ammunition to use against you. I think that's one of the biggest concerns for people. So they need to be very prudent in how they approach this subject. I know from my personal experience, and I know from talking to a lot of parents, they're coming almost from that mindset of Martin Luther King, just, peace, love, empathy, all of the good qualities that you want in children. And, this isn't about, I don't want my kids to learn about slavery, or I don't want my kids to learn about racism. No, absolutely not. We need to empathize. That helps us become better human beings. And it's very important that we make that clear. And I think there's a way to make this argument without the blame and shame that they want to put on the rest of us. Granite Rock in New Hampshire has been a leading source for getting information out to parents. So please, they are a great resource. Same with the 603. These people are great resources for you. Make sure you contact them immediately with any information that you find. Yep. Starting a petition, that's, is it enforceable? Somebody asked that the other day. Well, might not be enforceable, but if you get large numbers, it speaks volumes. I mean, it does speak to them. We have a petition going in Exeter right now on the problems that have been erupting in that school district. And it's an online petition. Well, that means that anybody can sign it, but you'd be amazed at how many people have signed this. And they've got over 500 signatures right now, declaring that they've lost confidence in the leadership in that school. And, is it something that is binding? Well, no, obviously not. It's just an online petition, but it does allow you to say, look, we got 550 signatures on here. Even if you throw out 100 signatures from maybe people who signed that aren't necessarily residents, you have a significant amount of people, and people are commenting that live in the district, and they're commenting, so they are sharing, they are speaking up. It also lays facts out to make your case against the agenda. So if this is, CRT related, Jim brought up earlier, what don't you want being taught in the schools? Well, this is where you can put that. You can put that on there and say, this is what's happening in our school, and this is the law that says that, this shouldn't be happening in our schools. It's just a great way to get people more involved and to address it. And it's also a way to maybe collect their emails and start building a list of local concerned citizens. Oh, and I would also keep sending that to the Board of Education, as you gather signatures. Oh, look, we have 100 today. Oh, look, we have 250. Oh, look, now we have 300. So, it speaks volumes. So support quality academics. That's the focus. If anything else you come away with, it's where's the problem in our school district that this needs to be addressed this way? And can we go back to supporting quality academics? Our kids suffered this last year immensely because of this remote learning. Many of the kids just suffered academically and emotionally. So just take it back to what's important, and that is quality academics. State your support for that in the classroom. Yes, to history being taught, especially on topics of slavery and racism. That needs to be affirmed and affirmed and affirmed, because the people that seem to be against this seem to want to paint this like we want our kids ignorant of history. Absolutely not. And yes, to children learning about great African-American leaders in history. Absolutely. This is what we want. We want kids to learn courage under fire. We want them to learn about the great leaders that led to freedom and led to a more perfect union. And that's what our founding documents allowed. So no to the shame and blame, no to dividing our children by race, and no to pushing prejudice. There's your talking points right there. I mean, you don't even really have to go even beyond that if you don't want to. Just making that statement, I think, speaks volumes and says a lot. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Remove your child from this kind of instruction. If there's something, maybe it falls under the law, maybe the law's in place, and you're seeing some things come in, you're like, I just really don't like this. I don't care what subject it is. Remove your child from that instruction, whether it be sex ed, whether it be drug education, whether it be whatever. Remove your child from this instruction. New Hampshire has a unique state law that allows you to opt your child out of objectionable materials used in the classroom. I fought for years to get that into law. That's one of the things that I did, and I'm very proud of it, and worked with some other people, great people on that, but we have that in law now. So you should have a school policy that says that You can replace objectionable materials at your expense. Now, it does have to come with the approval of the administration, but I haven't had any parents whose administrators refused. And if they do, well, it's time to call the media and it's time to take that to the school board. Because you should be able to direct your child's education. Look for good quality books that you can use as a replacement. Ask homeschoolers. They are a resource for you. Maybe when teachers see that parents are opting out of the propaganda, they'll return to a focus on good quality materials. I mean, just think if the whole class said, to anything, if you could get half the class to say, nope, we don't want this. I mean, that speaks volumes. And so, there at the bottom, there is a link to the website that tells you more about the actual law. So the other thing that we have is that now is the Educator's Code of Ethics and Conduct. So review that if something comes up. And if you believe that the teacher has violated any of these, file formal complaint through the Department of Education. And the attorney for that is Diana Fenton. She works at the Department of Education. Just send her an email. What I do, and I have done this on numerous occasions, is I filed a complaint, an official complaint. And I said, here's why I'm filing this complaint. This is what, and normally it comes after I file a right to know request. I get the documentation, I get the information. For instance, surveys, non-academic surveys, parents need to give their consent. And lately I'm finding that these school districts are giving out these surveys to these kids. And a lot of times it's graphic sex or something like that, sexual or, it could be anything, guns are in the home, things like that. And they need to ask your permission. So what I did is I filed the right to know request, gathered all the information. Then I filed an official complaint with the Department of Education. And again, just said, here's the facts, here's the violation, here's, I'm now officially filing a complaint, please open an investigation on that. And they're investigating a couple of schools right now. Next one. Okay, so watch the district's website for clues. Scan the district website. I think I mentioned that before. Look for examples of how they will tackle the subject of racism in the district and ask if this has been a problem. So I don't want to belabor that point. I think we've touched on that. We'll go to the next slide. Quote their own materials. So one very effective technique is to quote the material directly from the curriculum at the school board meetings and ask board members if they agree with these statements. This is so important. There is a video right now of these moms. Their kids were reading some pretty graphic material out of their books, and they went to the school board, and each one, because you have like 3 minutes, each one held up a sign, like a poster board, and it was all spelled out what they were reading, and they read it verbatim, and they read the graphic part verbatim, and it opens up eyes. So when you see something that's extremely maybe offensive or shocking or whatever, I mean, even if it's just so ridiculous, then go to the school board meeting, invite the media again if you can, and ask that, and then start, having maybe parents, if you're limited on time, or maybe you have enough time, maybe, sometimes they let you go longer than 3 to 5 minutes, but start reading it and just say, this is what you're teaching my kids in the classroom. Read it out loud. Again, people sometimes can be watching from their home. Sometimes people actually do watch the school board meetings. Me. And so it helps to get the word out, especially in the big districts. A lot of the big districts, there's parents at home watching this. And so it helps them to understand what's being taught in the classroom. And then ask them which of these divisive concepts they think is good to be taught in the classroom. So then the next one is be the voice of reason. Above all else, be reasonable, thoughtful, and professional in your approach. Race relations is an important topic for many parents, and the focus needs to be on what to teach. For instance, younger children could read books on kindness, which would instill good characteristics. Support a fair discipline for those who behave badly. I mean, one of the things that's missing from a lot of schools is behavior. I mean, they're almost, I mean, I get a lot of these parents telling me, this kid isn't disciplined. This kid, is not getting disciplined. Well, okay, so they're going to feed them all this, and then they're going to ignore maybe a child that's acting up and acting in a way that actually needs to be corrected. I mean, I was involved in a case in Hampton where a little girl was being bullied, and she's Black, and her parents were white. And I worked with the NAACP, and we addressed this issue. Why wasn't the white girl being punished for tormenting this girl for several years? That's where we're having some problems. I mean, these are the things that needs to be addressed. We want to address those issues. We don't want to be somebody who sweeps those issues under the rug. Racism exists. These things do exist, and we all know this. And it's okay to identify it. It's okay to address it. But this is a whole new worldview. So, I think that's the point to make is what are you teaching the children? And let's make sure that we're dealing with actual issues instead of, requiring that your children learn a whole new worldview. And so as your children get older, they need to learn historical events, but that should not be presented in a biased way that denigrates the United States of America. I mean, all you have to do is look at history and read what happened and look at what happened in the past to understand that we've made some big strides, and bravo. And do we have more to do? Absolutely. I don't think anybody's arguing against that. So just be logical and reasonable in your approach. And I think it makes a better case. All of history needs to be taught. Nobody's against history being taught. Those are the kinds of things that we need to do. Don't overlook the positive things. Your school board and members are hearing a lot of problems in the district from time to time. It does help to send out a letter to the school saying, hey, this has been great. I saw this. I sent that teacher a thank you note when I saw it on the website, sent it to the school board members. Let the school board members know that you appreciate the teacher teaching kids about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his message of peace and justice. Let's do some positive things too. Okay, next one. Next slide. Okay. If you can't change their minds though, you can work to change their votes. Let them know that if they continue to allow CRT in the schools, you will be replacing them with someone else. And then when the next election comes around, too many activists do waste too much time educating their public officials who are not open to hearing what you have to say. I mean, I think you tend to figure out who's open and who's not as you approach the subject. They kind of stand out. At some point, you have to stop trying to persuade with reason and start persuading with political threats. So yes, there are times where you need to tell them, look, you're not listening to the people. You're going to be replaced and we're going to find somebody. Next one. So find out if there's a DEI committee or a similar group, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the district, and find out when it meets and attend. Get recordings if available. And they generally want to hold these kinds of meetings in secret. But if you can be if it's an official board committee meeting or created as a result of the school board action, they can't meet in secret. So you need to know that. Start attending those meetings. Videotape them. I'm assuming you can videotape them. Maybe Jim can express that. But these are public meetings. So take notes. Let them know that they're being, that you're watching them, that you're interested in this. That's what the right to know request. That's what the phone calls are all about. Is just so they know that people are watching, and that's a good thing. And hopefully you won't find something that needs to be addressed. But if there is, obviously we need to address that. But it's important for them to know that we are going to look. So your social studies teachers, your histories teachers in your schools, I want to see the syllabus. I want to know what you're teaching. I want to know all the materials that are going to be used in your class. And I think that was the end. I do have a couple things I want to just bring up before I turn this back over to Jim. First of all, so this toolkit is, again, my ongoing effort to report on CRT in schools and local communities, but you can also contact me directly. It's very easy, Banfield Anne Marie, no E with that N, with that Anne, at gmail.com. Very easy, very easy to find. Again, focus on academics. Just a couple words of advice before I turn this over real quick. Don't turn on your neighbors. Stay focused. Aim your anger or whatever at who's running the school. You don't be drawn in. If one of your neighbors is saying something that you don't agree with, just don't be drawn into that battle. This is coming from your school district. These are coming from the people in charge. This divides. It divides a community. It's divisive concepts. Be very careful not to fall into that trap. Be thoughtful. And if you can't be thoughtful and kind in your response, maybe it's best to just walk away. I brought this up earlier. Those who think that you just need to remove your child from the school, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. I've been trying to tell people this for years, that you've got to stay engaged. Jim covered the bill that passed today, and that's really all I wanted to cover for you. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jim, and I'll certainly stick around if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie. Really appreciate all the time and effort you put into preparing this. For those of you who were not with us at the beginning, these slides and the recording of this webinar will be published on our website, 603alliance.org. We will have it posted there by Sunday. Just two quick comments. Number one, Anne Marie, you asked about public meetings being recorded. Yes, if it is a public meeting, you can record it. If someone tries to stop you from recording it, you should reach out to someone like New Hampshire Right to Know or the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. You can reach out to the 603 Alliance and we can connect you with those folks. They have fought those battles before when people were denied the right to record or photograph public meetings. It is a right. You have a right to do it. Number two is I just wanted to comment about collecting petition signatures. True, it's not enforceable, but when you consider that many school board races, especially in small towns, may only have 100 people voting in them, or 200 people voting in them, coming with a petition with 100 signatures on it of people who say, hey, get this right or we're going to vote you out next time, that can have an impact. I want to remind people that if you do have questions, those need to be submitted by email. The email address is info@603alliance.org. The sooner you can get those in, the better, because there is about a 1 to 2 minute delay in getting those. What I want to do next is just play a closing video, again, from Dan Richards, who's going to talk a little bit about what his experience was when he started to fight critical race theory in Lebanon, New Hampshire.
Hello again, guys. I wanted to share with you my experience in encountering critical race theory, how that experience played out, and hopefully arm you with some of the tools and the resolve that you're going to need in order to combat it in your own communities. So let me share my screen with you once again, and I can show you exactly what it was that I was dealing with here in Hanover, New Hampshire, and continue, unfortunately, to deal with. So I first encountered critical race theory at the beginning of January this year, and actually the end of January, when I received an email from our new associate principal at our elementary school describing an equity overhaul of our school. She was unwilling to tell me what this equity overhaul meant. So it's likely that some of you have received or encountered these emails and or heard conversations about equity. It's very interesting. Very few of the people that like to talk about equity are actually even able or willing to tell you what it means. So I sent her an email because I wanted to know, what does an equity overhaul of our school look like? What she then went on to describe was a social transformation, in fact, teaching for social transformation. And we went back and forth over many emails. While we were doing this, I received the syllabus for a course called Exploring Whiteness. And in that course, they described the Declaration of Independence as being the foundational event for the start, of white supremacy, if you can believe that. I also learned that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee had been meeting at our school since at least the beginning of 2019. And I also learned that one of the DEI initiatives had been to get training mandated for teachers and administrators within the school. And as part of that training, there was a module entitled Upstander Training that included a a series of instruction regarding how to interrupt people and how to prevent them essentially from speaking if what it was that they were saying was deemed to be unacceptable. So on February 25th, after I had this encounter via email with our associate principal, I went to a PTO meeting. And I went to the PTO meeting to talk about donating an entrepreneurship center to the school, not to talk about critical race theory or anything else. Before I was able to discuss entrepreneurship, however, conversation about HB 544, which was an anti-discrimination in divisive concepts bill, and critical race theory began at the PTO meeting. And I raised my hand and said that I was opposed to critical race theory and in support of HB 544. Everybody else at the meeting, there were about a dozen women who were attending, said that they were for critical race theory and against HB 544. And when I started to explain myself as to why, I was interrupted by a school administrator who said, "You are not allowed to speak. People with views like you, do not get to speak. I've been trained to interrupt you. You are not allowed to speak." And she did it in a very aggressive way. And I just couldn't believe what was happening. And I said, that's unacceptable. America is a free country. Down, and she got the text on the right hand side of this page, which she could not believe. She's, why should I not be okay? I'm attending a virtual PTO meeting at 7 o'clock at night. So after this event occurred, and I was interrupted in the way that I just described, we learned that our family was being called white supremacists and racists by the members of the PTO who had attended this call. I immediately wrote a letter of complaint to our superintendent and to the commissioner of education in the state of New Hampshire. But what I can tell you is that the attacks that occurred post my attendance at the PTO meeting resulted in my family basically being, shamed and shunned within our community. So I think you have to be ready for the kind of name calling, which are lies, and other kinds of social pressures that you're going to encounter for pushing back against this ideology. But make no mistake, it is 100% the right thing to do. On March 11, I went to a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee meeting and was told to leave. I showed up and said, "Hi," I introduced myself. "My name is Dan. I'm a parent. I'm interested in what you're doing with the DEI committee." And they said, "I'm sorry, this is not a public meeting and you are not allowed to leave." Despite the fact that there were school board members there, administrators there, and they had confirmed that they actually didn't report to anybody. There was no governance in place, no minutes being kept, and all of this likely in violation of New Hampshire law. So what I'm trying to do is just prepare you for the kinds of environments that you're going to enter. They're going to be hostile. People are not going to be accepting of your presence. When you try to speak, they're going to try and suppress your speech and prevent you from expressing yourself, also, again, in violation of the law. And it's generally going to be an unpleasant experience. But as I said before, it is absolutely not only worth doing, it is essential that you do this. I then, as part of my complaint, sent additional follow-up requests to our superintendent and was accused of to me as part of our initial interaction that was her ideology and that was what she does intend to do at our elementary school. We found later that the equity committee, such that it is, had issued the following updates in August, and that they were planning on overhauling the curriculum completely, making equity part of the fabric of everything, becoming less centered on reason and argument in our curricula, in teaching white privilege and racism starting in kindergarten. Make no mistake, this concept of white privilege and traits associated with whiteness, it is wrong, it is racist, and it has no place in our schools or anywhere in our society, in my opinion. Let me just leave you with this, and this is a story that broke in March of this year, 2021, regarding North Carolina's largest school district, which launched a campaign against, quote, whiteness in educational spaces, close quote. Because this is going to give you a window into what people who are proponents of critical race theory are thinking. So in Wake County, North Carolina, the schools assert that whiteness perpetuates the system of injustice and that the district's whitewashed curriculum was doing real harm to our students and educators. Now, you could swap out Wake County, North Carolina for virtually any other school system in the country that's trying to inculcate our students and indoctrinate our students in critical race theory. And it's happening right here in Hanover, New Hampshire. Equity leaders, the people who are pushing the critical race theory, should have the confidence to take risks and make difficult decisions that are rooted in their values, not your values as a parent, their values. Even in the face of opposition, equity leaders can draw on a heartfelt conviction for what is best for students and families. Again, they're dictating what is best for students and families, your students and your families. You don't get a say. They're the ones who dictate that. You can't let teachers and parents deter you from the work, the teacher said. White parents' children are benefiting from the system. So what they're doing is basically saying that parents, according to the teachers, should be considered an impediment to social justice. You are the barrier. And guess what? You need to be an impermeable barrier, because what they're teaching here, while they love to call it social justice, they're teaching discrimination and racism, and it is wrong. In other words, the school should displace the family as the ultimate arbiter of political morality and morality in general. And that is exactly what they are trying to do. So I urge you to stand strong. Do not let them push you around. Show up to school board meetings. Speak. Do not let them interrupt your speech. And if they do, be disciplined and respond in a way that is decent and honest. Because the other side, when it comes down to actually debating the facts, most of them cannot do it. In fact, I haven't encountered anybody who can do it. So thank you so much for listening this evening. And thank you again to the 603 Alliance for supporting the conversation on this incredibly important topic. And good luck in your fight against critical race theory. And I'll be right there with you. Hello.
All right. So that concludes our presentation. I want to just remind people that we have been recording this webinar. It will be available on the 603 Alliance website no later than Sunday, posted along with slides and materials, so you will have all of the links. And we encourage you to share it. Share it with other people in your community. Get involved and do what you can to make a difference in your local community. I also want to remind people that we have our July 24th event coming up, RevCon 2021. It's an all-day conference for activists. It's an opportunity to get to know other people around the state of New Hampshire who have similar values and are fighting for limited government and fairness and equality, not equity, in our state. So visit the 603 Alliance website for that. And our dinner speaker will be Mike Lindell. If you'd like to come to the dinner, that is a separate ticket, separate event. So check out the 603 Alliance website for further details. With that, we were going to go to Q&A. I do not have any questions at this time. And I know it's getting a little bit late. Our scheduled time, ending time is now. So with that, I think we're going to close it out. I'm going to say, everybody, thank you very much for attending. Reach out to us if you have any further questions or want any kind of follow-up from this. But thank you for attending. We appreciate your interest and look forward to hearing your experiences as we move forward with this. Have a great evening.
Good night.